Hi, this is actually an experiment, and I must confess that I'm taking the assistance of my daughter, who's presently on school holidays. If this experiment works well, then I will send a companion video to go with each of my articles which I publish. So therefore, I must wish my daughter and myself all the best for this new exercise which you are undertaking. The article which I published yesterday was on GA arbitration clauses, and I'm going to speak on this topic. And for those of you who would probably prefer to hear a video cast or sound or by sound, you could perhaps hear it if you do not want to see the written article, so to say. Uh, so, if you look at the earlier article on Ever Given, for those you must be aware of the issue which the Evergreen vessel, which was grounded at the Suez Canal, and which captivated the entire world because the logistics chain was hampered. The Suez Canal was blocked. In one of the articles, I did mention that the average adjuster had sought average guarantees from insured cargo interest, which provided for an LMA arbitration clause. With respect to uninsured cargo interests, I was not aware what type of security was sought, but given that generally you find the average bonds and average guarantees have provide for similar provisions, I did postulate that the average adjuster would have requested for average bonds again with similar LMAA clauses. Uh, I was a bit puzzled because I felt it would not be in the best of interest for cargo interest to agree for any provision of security with LMA a arbitration clause, and therefore the purpose of this article, this talk, is to set out my reasons why I feel that it might not be the best fit, and to also invite cargo interests or parties who were involved in this matter to perhaps revert on their comments or reach out separately to me to perhaps to state why they felt that was a better fit. Uh, as always, this article is just sharing of thoughts, and therefore it invites free discussions from both parties, so to say. Uh, so the first point is, invariably disputes will arise. Human beings are complex animals, so to say. We all see the same things, but we can see it differently. I wear a spectacles, so the power of eyes of mine in my eyes is different from others. So therefore, we see the same things, but we may have a different position on it, and therefore sometimes disputes do arise. So in shipping, you would generally find that the charter parties or bills of lading would provide for a dispute resolution clause, which will allow parties to decide on how if they should have a dispute to deal with the dispute. In the case of a charter party, when a vessel is chartered, even if their underlying parties, if the vessel is subchartered, uh, generally the subcharter party would be on similar terms. So you would find the dispute resolution clauses along the chain would generally be similar. But in the case of a containerized shipping, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of parties involved, each of them having different BL forms, each of them having different verdicts with different jurisdiction clauses. So you have a multitude of contractual provisions, and all of which may not be similar, so to say. The jurisdiction might provide for different locations, may provide for arbitration or a court process. In fact, some of the clients which I have suggested, with some of the forms which I have suggested to my clients, do provide for arbitration. So therefore, if you have a dispute, you would need to look at the dispute resolution clause. Although I have not mentioned in the article, invariably liner bills of lading do provide for an option for the carrier to subcontract on any and all terms, and with their contractual party being bound by it. The case in point is the Pioneer container, a bailment on terms. So it might be quite possible to say that, listen, the jurisdiction clause, if there is a sub carrier involved, it should be based on whatever terms are there. So I leave that to another day, so to say, to speak further on that. Uh, so in charter parties, what happens is parties are generally on equal bargaining power, and therefore parties can freely negotiate. In the case of bills of lading, it is not so, and therefore, you know, generally you find that they are boilerplate, or wordings which are provided by the liner companies, and the cargo interests have to agree, or they have to look to give their business to someone else whose wording they may be more comfortable. My understanding is no one ever really looks at the wording at the point they contract. It's generally done later, and that time they do come to a rude shock, so to say. Uh, so, in this case, in the ever given, what happened was following the incident. I did say that the security wording sought was with provide LMA. The question then would be, should the cargo interests agree to the wording sought? Are they compelled to? My view is they are not compelled to. They have a duty to provide adequate security, and if the wordings are not in line with what is generally agreed in the market, and if it is detrimental to the cargo interest, they can certainly refuse to provide security and instead offer to provide adequate security. What is adequate would then be, or reasonable security, what is reasonable would be something, a question of fact would be decided by the circumstances. Yes. If parties cannot agree, then obviously, one of the parties can go to the court, court which has jurisdiction over this matter, to seek assistance so that the court can rule over it. Now, in the case of ever given, I am not aware whether the cargo interest had an option to agree or not to agree to the provision to the security wordings proposed by owners. Now, even if they could, negotiate to the right security wordings, the fact is that was it fit for purpose? In the ever given, there were about 18,000 containers. Yes, and in, like I said at the beginning of this talk, there would be disputes, and if even a small percentage of parties have a dispute, then there will be a lot of arbitrations which should be initiated. The LMA procedural rules do not provide for consolidation. What is consolidation? Simply means that when there are similar arbitrations being involved, you could consolidate all this into a single arbitration. And the advantage of this is there will be a saving of costs, there will be a saving of time. But the LMA arbitration rules do not provide for it. Each dispute is a separate dispute, and therefore theoretically it should be conducted separately. Having said that, English Arbitration Act 1996 does provide for consolidation if the parties agree, and it is rare for all the parties to agree, because when there is a dispute, people will generally take a tactical position to deal with their issues, and they will see what is most tactically beneficial for them. And therefore, my thoughts are that even if cargo interests had agreed for an arbitration clause, this was not the right fit, so to say. The other issue which I also strongly feel is equity. General average came with the base of equity, fair and equitable. Yeah, and yes, when you look at the adjustment of general average, it has diverged, it has gone a bit more different, because it's generally adjusted on the basis of York and Antwerp rules, which are contractually incorporated either in the charter party or in the bills of lading. Uh, so, what is general average in the York and Antwerp rules may actually be not the same under common law, which is much more stricter. But having said that, there is a basis of fairness. So, if someone has decided to use arbitration to impose or to get some advantages, tactical advantages, then I think the very reason of equity is being defeated, and which I strongly believe should not be permitted. Why do I say that? If you have an English arbitration, there is an implied duty of confidentiality. That means parties are not free; you cannot discuss, and it's kept confidential. And perhaps if owners do not want things to be divulged, they would propose arbitration, and so that they can impose this duty. While this may all be okay in other types of dispute, I do not feel it correct to be in GA where equity, fairness is one of the paramount things. One of the attacks against arbitration is the development of precedents, the development of soft law, and sometimes arbitrators get it right. I think the market is the best what do you say decider, and therefore if what I say is keep it open, let there be no duty of confidentiality. Then what happens is previous arbitration awards would be published, everything would be in the open this thing. So my view is, if even if arbitration is decided or is felt at the best fit for GA claims, there should be a no